Today, we're diving into one of the most dramatic and honestly overlooked chapters in ancient history. We're talking about the final chaotic moments of Egypt's legendary Old Kingdom. This is the story of the 8th Dynasty, a tale of an empire taking its very last breath.
And that really is the big question hanging over all of this, isn't it? How does a golden age actually end? For centuries, Egypt was the very picture of stability and power. So, what happens when all of that starts to come apart at the seams?
So let's set the scene. We're stepping right into the twilight of an era, the Old Kingdom. This was the age of the Great Pyramid builders, of pharaohs who were basically seen as gods walking on earth. But by the time we get to the 8th Dynasty, that golden age was fading and fast.
And this timeline, it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. The 8th Dynasty is just this tiny sliver of time, right? A really turbulent window of maybe 20 years, squeezed between the legendary Old Kingdom and the total chaos of what's called the First Intermediate Period. This was a dynasty living right on the edge of a cliff.
And you have to remember what was being lost here. For hundreds and hundreds of years, Egypt had enjoyed unity, incredible wealth, and the kind of power that let them build wonders that, let's be honest, still blow our minds today. That context makes the collapse we're about to witness even more stunning.
So, what caused it all to crumble? Well, the core problem was a total breakdown of central authority. While the pharaoh's power in the capital city was fading, a new force was rising up out in the provinces.
For centuries, all power flowed from the capital, Memphis. But now, you've got these regional governors, these powerful families out in the provinces, and they were getting stronger and stronger. In places like Heracleopolis, they basically started running their territories like their own private kingdoms. And their loyalty to the pharaoh, yeah, that was starting to look pretty shaky. You've essentially got this massive tug of war for control. Every ounce of power those regional leaders grabbed for themselves was an ounce of power the pharaoh back in Memphis lost. The famous line, "the center cannot hold," well, this is a perfect example. It just couldn't.
And this brings us right to the 8th Dynasty itself. It's so easy to just look at them and call them failures. But really, it's probably more accurate to see them as rulers making one final, desperate gamble to hold a fracturing kingdom together.
One source actually calls this period the waning breaths of the Old Kingdom, and man, that is the perfect metaphor. This wasn't some new beginning, it was the very end of an exhale, a last-ditch, desperate attempt to keep the old system from dying completely.
So, facing this huge crisis, the pharaohs of the 8th Dynasty had a two-part strategy. It was kind of a mix of trying to look powerful, while at the same time trying to bribe the very people who were chipping away at that power.
Here's how it worked. From Memphis, they kept issuing royal decrees to project authority. Sending the message, hey, don't forget, we're still in charge. But at the same time, they were handing out tax breaks and special privileges to powerful regional leaders. It's a classic move, right? You buy loyalty when you can no longer command it.
But as you can probably guess, these strategies were really just delaying the inevitable. The writing was on the wall, and you could see the signs of decay absolutely everywhere, from the royal court all the way to the art being made across the country.
I mean, just look at this list of kings. It tells you everything about the instability. It's a revolving door of pharaohs, one after another, and many of them are little more than names to us now. Even the last king, Ebi, managed to build a pyramid, but it was a tiny, modest thing compared to the giants of the past.
And you can see this decline reflected in the art and architecture, too. Think of it like a barometer for a civilization's health. The 8th Dynasty just didn't have the money or the centralized control to pull off those grand projects anymore. Monuments got smaller, and the artwork started to look less refined than it did in the kingdom's golden age.
And this is where things get really fascinating, because you see this cultural split happening. While Memphis was trying to maintain that official, high-quality, refined style, like on these administrative seals, out in the provinces, a much simpler, even cruder style of art started to pop up. The kingdom wasn't just breaking apart politically, it was fracturing culturally too.
In the end, the dynasty's gamble failed. Their last breath faded out, and Egypt plunged into what's known as the First Intermediate Period, a time of fragmentation, civil war, and chaos.
And that's really how history remembers them. They were the last pharaohs of the Old Kingdom. They didn't necessarily cause the collapse, but they were the ones at the helm when it happened. The final line of defense for an old world order that was already coming apart.
And maybe that's the best way to think of them. Not as failures, but as the final, fragile bridge between one of history's greatest empires and its inevitable fall. They were a crucial transition point in a much, much larger story.
So we circle right back to our first question. The story of the 8th dynasty really shows us that even the most powerful, most stable structures can crumble from within. It makes you think about that delicate balance between the center and the edges, and how power, once it starts to slip away, is almost impossible to get back.